Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Karam, board certified facial plastic surgeon. I specialize in facial rejuvenation, which basically means I help people look as young as they feel. And today I'm going to talk about a topic that many of you have had a lot of interest in and a lot of comments and questions about, and that is help us understand the topic of lasers and how they relate to facial and skin rejuvenation. I know lasers in general are a very intimidating and difficult subject to understand because it's really, at the end of the day, it's a physics concept that is applied to aesthetic medicine, and there's a ton of different lasers and laser varieties out there, so it makes it extremely hard for you as a consumer to decide specifically which laser is right for you and for what types of problems that they correct. So instead of looking at this as a broad marketing approach, we're going to look at it from a fundamental approach to put you in the driver's seat so that you can decide specifically based on your own concerns which lasers are right for you. And in order to do that, we're going to start from the top. We're going to learn about what lasers are. We're going to talk about the different categories of lasers. We're going to talk about the different things that lasers address specifically in those categories, and then ultimately how you can pair those up with the specific concerns you have to ultimately get the best skin that you can possibly have, and how that fits into the overall skincare rejuvenation routines and regimens. All right, so without further ado, let's break it down. All right, so what is a laser? So laser is actually an acronym. It stands for Light Amplification of Stimulated Emission of Radiation. So basically what it's doing is it's taking certain chemical compounds and it is stimulating the electrons so that you get energy that's dispersed. Now, what makes lasers also extremely interesting and unique is the light that's being emitted from the laser is collimated, meaning that it's moving in a narrow focused path. All the light is moving in parallel lines. So that's why you use things like laser pointers and different things. You get a light that travels long distances and emits a very fine line at the point of contact with whatever surface. Now, what that also means is that when you're using the laser, you're able to generate a response. And what is the point of response? It depends on what the chromophore is. And in skin, the chromophores can either be water or they can be melanin. And we're going to talk about why that's important, because depending on what the chromophore that you are actually trying to target, you're going to get a specific type of response. So for example, when you're trying to go after red capillaries, well, you want the chromophore to be hemoglobin, which hemoglobin is found in blood, so that when you see these red capillaries, you're able to target them. When you're trying to do resurfacing, you want the chromophore to be water, so that it targets water and nothing else. And the same thing goes for pigment. When you're trying to address pigment specifically, you want it to go after melanin, which is what basically creates the sun damage and patchy discoloration that you see in skin. So it's beautiful physics, it's beautiful science, and once you understand it and you're able to harness that understanding, you're able to very clearly understand, hey, when do I want to do a CO2? When do I want to do an Erbium YAG? When do I want to do a pulsed dye laser? When do I want to do IPL? It'll put it all into perspective, so you're not just shooting, blindly at different treatments based on what you've heard from your friends or what your local medical spa or dermatology practice or plastic surgery office is describing as the latest and greatest treatment that's available. Additionally, what it's going to do is once you understand these different categories, when a new product comes out, you're going to understand what category it fits under and learn how to use that particular category to get the change that you're looking for. So knowing what it does and what it can and cannot do is going to be hugely important, and that's going to be the topic of this video. So let's break down concept number 2. What are the different categories of lasers? Basically, looking into categories of lasers, you have 2 general categories of lasers. Category number 1 is a concept called ablative lasers. Ablative means it destroys something. And for lack of a better term, I know I'm using a very kind of destructive sense to the term, but at the end of the day, there's a target, and that target basically blows up as a result of the laser. If it's pigment, blows up the pigment. If it's skin, it blows up the skin. And it's done in obviously a very controlled way, but that's, graphically what's actually happening. So those are ablative lasers. It actually creates a physical removal of something. Now, non-ablative lasers, effectively, what they're doing is they're not damaging the surface of the skin whatsoever. They're not targeting, generally speaking, the actual skin structure. What they're doing is they're going after a very specific target within the skin. So non-ablative lasers don't remove skin. In fact, what they just do is they target typically pigment and things that are related to structures of the skin, such as red blood cells that are found in capillaries and pigment. So non-ablative lasers do not remove the surface of the skin. Ablative lasers remove the surface of the skin and whatever else happens to live in that space, right? Okay, so now that we know ablative and non-ablative, because you're going to hear these terms out there, now let's talk about the specific types of lasers that fall under each of these categories. So under the non-ablative category, you essentially have things like IPL, Cyton BBL, which is just a term for broadband light, and IPL stands for intense pulse light. Similar but slightly different concepts. Then you have pulse dye lasers that are focusing on the pigments that are related to the reds, like capillaries, etc. And then you have Erbium YAG, which is a ND YAG laser that focuses again on structures that are in the middle of the skin, typically a lot of structures like red blood cells and things like that that are going to be focused on that. So those are the terms you're going to hear. You're going to hear ND YAG, you're going to hear of pulse dye, you're going to hear of IPL, you're going to hear of BBL. Those are lasers that are going to be used typically for pigments. Okay, so under the ablative category, you primarily have two. One is the most common one you've heard of, which is CO2 lasers, and then you've got Erbium YAG. CO2 and Erbium YAG share one commonality, and that is they focus on the water as its primary chromophore. They focus on water, and as a result, because the skin is mostly made of water, the first thing it's going to come in contact with is the surface water, and as a result, it's going to remove that upper layer of skin. So basically, it's used as a resurfacing type of a laser. Resurfacing means you're removing the surface of the skin or anything that's in that particular range. Now, depending on how much energy you emit into that off the CO2 or the Erbium YAG laser, the depth of penetration of that laser is going to depend on that, primarily based on how many passes you take with the laser, as well as the energy you generate through there. So now, without getting too bogged down, just simply think CO2 and Erbium YAG, they're generally resurfacing, and the other ones are non-ablative and non-resurfacing. However, here's where it gets interesting. All these treatments have a different downtime associated with them. So non-ablative, generally speaking, has less of a downtime because you're not, affecting the surface of the skin. So there's no need for ointments and different things like that to allow the skin to heal. Resurfacing lasers will remove the surface of the skin. Therefore, you need to put an ointment on to cover, and it takes longer to recover. So for people who have longer recovery, we'll use that. But the bigger sort of picture is they're treating two totally different things. The resurfacing is, think of it as a lawnmower. It's actually removing the entire surface of the skin, and as a result, you're getting a fresh layer of skin that comes through. Doesn't necessarily address red pigments. It doesn't address deeply penetrating brown pigments, but it's removing everything. So the end result of that is typically a skin that looks a little bit brighter, fresher, and if there's some pigments that happen to live in that upper surface, they're going to be gone, so the overall complexion of the skin is going to look better, more glow, more brightness. The other treatments isn't going to affect the texture or the surface of the skin, but it'll clarify the discolorations. Non-ablative lasers will address that. Now, between the CO2 and erbium, the only point I want you to remember is the CO2 takes longer to recover from versus erbium, because CO2 affects the skin through a type of interaction with the skin that creates heat, and Erbium YAG does not. So Erbium YAG actually has a lower recovery rate because there's not as much thermal damage to the air, there's not as much redness and inflammation that's caused by the laser. So I'm going to back up a second. Many of you know that old school resurfacing lasers were primarily CO2. And when you see the CO2 patients, they look like they've been through basically like a burn or a major bomb or something. They look terrible, swollen, peely, oozy, all that kind of stuff. So even though they were the primary way of treating resurfacing, they've kind of fallen off because that's a lot to put a person through, and the recovery could take 1 or 2 months. Erbium YAG, that's designed by Cyton and some other companies, is the particular resurfacing laser that I use. And the main reason is because the recovery is like 14 days, and it does everything that we want it to do, which is removing the top layers of the skin, but it does it in a very precise way, so you know exactly how deep you're going. And as a result, 14 days is not a lot for somebody to recover from, especially if they're undergoing surgery. So I combine those a lot. I do a full resurfacing plus the laser. Now, let's take a step further and let's kind of back up for a moment and let's talk about another category of laser, which is called the fractionated variety. Fractionated means if you take the entire surface of the skin, the laser is only treating a portion or a fraction of it. Because at the end of the day, most people can't take a ton of downtime. It's hard for somebody to take 14 days to recover from a laser. So as a result of that, the laser manufacturers came up with a new category called fractionated, which just addresses a portion of the skin. So think about it as like little dots of laser being put throughout the skin, leaving bridges of intact skin around it so that it heals much faster. So it's a blend in a way between, or a compromise between an ablative and a non-ablative laser. But at the end of the day, because only 15, 20, 25% of the skin is being treated with each treatment, you recover much faster. In many cases, you don't even need any ointment or any of that type of thing. But the caveat is you're going to need to do it more than once. So typically 2 to 3 sessions is necessary to get enough treatment to the skin so that your skin looks better. So these are brand names that are very popular, like Fraxel, Pro-Fractional, again from Cyton. And the difference between those two is Fraxel uses CO2 and Cyton uses the Erbium YAG. Now I'm going to take one step further and give you another category, and that is a concept of a hybrid laser, where the combination of the deeper non-ablative laser is used in addition to an ablative fractionated laser, so that you can kind of, in a way, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can get some of those deep pigments taken care of while getting some level of resurfacing. So basically this is how it works. Brand names: Halo from Cyton, Fraxel. They have several different types of Fraxels, but the Fraxel lasers will do a hybrid type of an approach. And as a result, you get kind of the benefits of pigment control and resurfacing, so the overall skin looks better. But again, you're going to need a couple to 3 treatments of that. So let's quickly review. We've got non-ablative, IPL and BBL, ND-YAG and pulse dye. You have the ablative, which is going to be your CO2 and your Erbium YAG. Then you've got full field resurfacing, which means you cover the entire surface of the skin. That's CO2 and Erbium YAG. And as we mentioned, Erbium YAG has the advantage of being less downtime versus CO2, and most people don't do full field CO2 anymore anyway. And then you've got fractionated, and then you've got hybrid. And basically those are the different categories that you can choose from. Now, how do you decide what treatment is right for you? So let's break it down like this. If your primary issue is texture, you've got deep lines, you've got a lot of dullness on the skin, your skin feels rough, well, guess what? Best way to treat it is a full field resurfacing. I highly recommend getting all that skin off, getting a fresh new layer to come up. That's great. So my weapon of choice there is the Cyton, either nano peel, micro peel, or contour tiara, which these are just different levels of depth, and again, different levels of recovery accordingly. But removing all that dead stuff means that the top layer of the stratum corneum gets removes all the dullness, all the dead layers of skin that exist there, and as a result you get this bright, fresh glistening. I think of it as kind of you're taking off the top peels of an onion, so you get that glistening layer again. So that only happens with full field resurfacing. Then, if you don't have the downtime and you don't want to go through ointment and all that kind of stuff, you'll take on a hybrid approach or a fractionated approach. So that's where you're going to go through several treatments, but you're going to space them out every 2-3 months or whatever it might be, and you're not going to really go through major recovery, but you're going to still address your skin. So over time your skin will get a little bit better, but not all at once. But you don't have to go through a big recovery and take time off of life and work and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you've got your primary concerns are red pigments, brown pigments, sun damage, that kind of thing, but your overall skin tone and complexion are good and you really don't want to take downtime, your choice is going to be the BBL from Sciton or the IPO from a number of different manufacturers. And that's going to address that. Very well, like dark pigmentation, sun damage. I mean, 3 or 4 treatments with an IPL or a BBL, so much of that is gone and looks great. Now here's where it gets sort of interesting. If you've got thicker, bigger capillaries, for example, you might not be able to use the IPL or BBL to totally get after it. Even though they're great for red pigment, you might need to move up to a pulse dye laser to get after those kind of deeper and more heavy looking capillaries. But again, now you know what works. You got these little capillaries around your nose, you got capillaries on your cheeks. It might be best to use a pulse dye laser for those. You've got brown pigmentation, it's going to be IPL. You've got tone and textural issues, you're going to go full field resurfacing. Now you kind of have an idea of where all these things generally fit together. Now, final point here. I don't want you to think about lasers, and this is probably one of the most important things. I don't want you to think about lasers as the end all for skin treatment, and too many people think of it this way. So what I mean by that is this. A lot of my patients think that they're doing all the right things for their skin because once or twice a year or 3 times a year they get some type of a laser. That's like taking a boot camp. That's like doing a boot camp 3 or 4 times a year or twice a year, or whatever it is. What about all that time in between? That's not how you treat skin. The way you're going to treat skin, and you're going to hear me say this over and over again, but the way you're going to treat skin is you're going to get after it on a daily basis. So that basically means daily sun protection, because even if you wipe away all the pigment with a IPL or BBL, guess what? They're all going to come right back because the cells are still producing pigment. But skin care using things like retinols and vitamin C and non-hydroquinone lighteners, all that that's decreasing the production of melanin. Using these different different type of active ingredients is going to keep the surface of the skin from needing to be constantly exfoliated by a laser. It's going to keep some cell turnover going. So there's a lot of very, very important foundational value of using a combination of daily broad spectrum sunscreen, but daily active ingredients. And that has been my biggest mission and one of my biggest motivations of why I developed the Karam MD trifecta, because too many patients don't know what to use. They didn't recognize that even if they learn about them, it ends up being like 5 or 6, 7, 8 steps. And the trifecta basically turns it all into literally 3 steps, just a minute or 2 of application, and you covered all of the things that you need. Pigments get better, collagen improves, elastin improves, brightness improves, exfoliation starts to happen, especially if you use a product like Polish, which enzymatically exfoliates. But that's what you got to do on a daily basis so your skin keeps getting better and better. And then you use lasers to complement and elevate the overall treatment. So you're basically using it to sort of jumpstart or go to the next level from what you're getting with your skincare. But the skincare is going to give you the durability and longevity and get the most out of your skin laser treatment. So I want you to really frame things in the right way. And I feel this video has given you all the tools to put everything in context. What you need to do daily with skincare and sun protection, that becomes your foundation. Use of these different types of lasers to take you to the next level. Guys, I hope that helps bring perspective and clarity to a topic that can sometimes feel a little bit daunting. But again, it shouldn't just think about these categories that we described. You might have to watch this video again because I know there's a lot of information here, but take some notes and put it into context, because this is what's going to give you the driving ability to manage the landscape that's in front of you. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. If you like this type of content, I produce 2 to 3 videos a week on topics just like this to empower you guys, and share it with friends and family, because the more people know, the better it is. And ultimately, if you liked it, hit like. If you have any questions whatsoever, or you just want to comment on what you thought of the video, definitely drop me a comment below. Appreciate everything, guys. Let me know if there's any other topics that you would like to discuss. You can also drop that in the comments. I definitely pay attention. This was one of them that has come up, so I'm glad we've had a chance to go over. And there's more information about skin, micro needling, skin care, what to do, etc. On the playlist to follow. So make sure you peruse through there and get a chance to look at all that. Everyone, thank you so much. Dr. Amir Karam.